Welcome back to Behind the Palms. I'm Ken Anderson, and today we're about to dive the Amaryllis shipwreck off the coast of Singer Island here in Florida. And this is a really cool story because it takes us back to surfing in the 1960s. So let's go take a look. Before we dive in on the Amaryllis, let's jump back a few decades to the beginnings of surfing in Florida. Now, surfing has a well-known history in Hawaii, but its start on the East Coast is a little less known.
Well, early surfing in Florida started right after the turn of the century. The earliest written accounts are about 1907. The earliest photo that we've been able to find is people surfing in front of the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach.
In the early 1900s, Florida beaches were all about relaxation and health, not surfing. Bathhouses, piers, and seaside casinos were the main attractions.
Tourism in Florida really booms in the 1880s. Beach activities was all about your health. You were more inclined to wade into the water and just enjoy the salt air. Post-World War II, there was a population and tourist boom in South Florida. You're starting to see activities for fun and leisure at the beach.
Surfing in Florida started small, mostly belly boarding in places like Daytona and Miami. But by the 50s and 60s, lighter boards and pop culture gave the sport a boost.
Not only were people moving to South Florida, but they were also traveling and enjoying themselves here.
When I was a kid, I surfed at the reef on Singer Island. And then if you had a friend with a car, you could go up to Juneau and Hobe Sound, and Fort Pierce was the closest place with the biggest waves.
I started surfing on an inflatable surf mat, and you could rent those for 25 cents. So that's how I started riding waves, and we didn't even think about standing up on them.
Early boards were heavy and hard to handle, but innovation made the sport more accessible, and soon everyone wanted to ride the waves.
The early boards were solid wood, then they were hollow, and then when you got into the late 50s, the polyurethane foam was first being used for surfboards. But when the foam boards came out, the weight got down to about 25 to 30 pounds, and the surfing culture exploded.
Surfing becomes a mainstream pop reference. It also is a budget-friendly activity for those that just wanted to enjoy the outdoors.
Everybody wanted to surf. Everybody had a surfboard. When you were young, you could learn to surf in about 6 weeks.
Surf culture was made popular with references in movies and music in the 1950s and 60s.
By the 60s, surfing wasn't just a sport, it was a cultural phenomenon. Movies like Endless Summer and songs like Surfin' USA captured the spirit of the waves.
Duke Hanamoko introduced surfing to the world, but then Gidget, Sandra Dee, the movie Gidget, introduced surfing to pop culture, and that was in 1959, and surfing just blew up after that.
Yet Endless Summer came out in the early 60s, the seminal surfing movie, and the Beach Boys, now the #1 recorded group in American history. So between all those things influencing surf culture, everybody wanted to be a surfer.
You could spend weekends on the beach with campfires, and the whole neighborhoods would come out and spend the weekends on the beach.
People would buy a surfboard, put racks on their car, and put the new surfboards on their car and ride to the beach and never even go in the water. So it became a cultural phenomenon.
And when the Amaryllis arrived, it became the centerpiece of a growing surfing community. Her story took a turn in 1965.
With over 30 Greek sailors on board, it was heading from England to Louisiana.
But then was blown ashore by Hurricane Betsy.
The Amaryllis was attempting to enter the port of Palm Beach in order to take refuge during Hurricane Betsy.
Apparently they lost steering and they missed Palm Beach Inlet by a mile during the hurricane.
It ran aground on Singer Island next to the Rutledge Motel.
And overnight, she became a permanent part of the landscape and a surprise attraction for the locals.
The Amaryllis coming ashore created a focal point for surfing in Palm Beach County, and it helped legitimize Palm Beach County as a surfing location.
So what made the Amaryllis so special? Waves. Her massive hull disrupted the current, creating a surf break that drew surfers
from across the state.
The abandoned Amaryllis became a recreation zone for many people due to the wave it created.
It came in on about a 15-degree angle, and it created a perfect surf break. The northeast wind could be blowing, big swells coming and all choppy, but when they came into the ship, it was like a breakwater, and plus it blocked the wind because it was 440 feet long, and it just created a beautiful wave. It was there from September of 1965 to August of 1968.
While we didn't have the largest waves, we had the ability to surf year-round, especially during hurricane season when you would have the potential for large waves.
When I first heard about the Amaryllis, I had just bought my first car. I was a high school sophomore in 1965, and I bought a 51 Ford Woody for $35. And we would load 6 surfboards on top and go up to the Amaryllis and go surfing.
You could surf when you got there in the morning, and then go home and eat, and try to recover and go out and surf again, and surf until the sun went down.
There was no place you had to pay to park. You could just drive up off-road up into the Australian pines there on the dune to check the surf, spend the night if you want.
People would come up from Miami. There were no restrictions. I mean, you could just pull up on the sand off A1A and walk in because there was no hotels, there were no condos, so it was very easy to get to it. And one day I was at the ship, I counted 250 boards in the water.
Surfing attracted lots of young people, and unfortunately that also attracted potential riffraff, as some people called them.
The surfing culture back then was all teenagers. There were very few people over 20 years old who were surfing.
Even when there was no surf, people would be out there on their boards just paddling around or hanging out at the beach.
Places like Delray Beach saw crowds of teenagers on the beach in front of the hotels where they wanted all the rich tourists to be able to put their beach towels. And so they said, we don't want the teenagers on the beach here, especially in the tourist season, so let's ban surfing.
Not everyone was thrilled with surfing's rise. Palm Beach even banned surfing in the 1960s, and surfers had to fight all the way to the Florida Supreme Court to overturn it.
We banded together and we hired Joel Daves, who later became the mayor of West Palm Beach, as our attorney.
We thought that was terrible, but it was happening, so we took the town of Palm Beach to court, and we won at the same state Supreme Court level.
The state Supreme Court finally ruled that surfing could be regulated, but it couldn't be banned.
That was a precedent-setting case. The citation is Carter versus the town of Palm Beach, and it's been used all over the country to help protect surfing.
Thanks to their efforts, surfing didn't just survive, it thrived. For 3 years, the Amaryllis was a local landmark, and a bit of a headache. Fires, oil leaks, and rusting debris made her both an attraction and a problem.
The Amaryllis eventually wore out its welcome with the clanging of its metals and the eyesore that it became due to graffiti and vandalism.
The Amaryllis was on the beach for 3 years.
It also became a danger to the environment with the amount of oil that still remained on board, potentially spilling and damaging the coral reef it had beached on.
Eventually, the sandbar worked its way all the way out there, and as the sandbar moved out, the wave quality got less and less because it would end up closing out.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers cut it into multiple sections and were able to tow it away about a quarter of a mile from where it had beached and sank it, turning it into an artificial reef.
The Amaryllis gave Florida surfers some great waves and left behind a thriving reef teeming with life. It's proof that even a shipwreck can create waves, both in the ocean and in history.
Hundreds of people came to the ship, and it was the best spot on the East Coast for just a few years. And then later they cut it up and they made an artificial reef out of it, out in deep water for scuba divers. So you can scuba dive on the Amaryllis now.
To this day, it continues to be a tourist attraction, not only for those spectators that came in the 1960s to see it when it beached on Singer Island, but now as a tourist attraction for those that want to dive it as an artificial reef.
That was like a short space in time of a couple of years where we just had the best surfing spot on the east coast of the United States.
The Amaryllis may be gone from the beach, but her story lives on in the waves, the reef, and the memories of the surfing community.